Hello, utility fleet world. It's Kurt Moreland, associate publisher, and we are here with another edition of Under the UFP Hood. And I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Julie Gomez of Tucson Electric Power. Julie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm excited for this interview.
Well, you're very welcome. And coincidentally, and we're going to kind of touch upon this, Julie was also the cover story of our June edition. So it really complements this podcast, which is really good. So, Julie, I'm going to ask my first question to you is, how did you get involved in the fleet business? And how did you get involved at Tucson Electric Power? And I'm going to kind of give a hint based on the June article. You kind of worked your way up through the corporate ladder, didn't you?
Yep, I sure did. And in the beginning, I did not have fleet on the radar at all. So I started at the company in customer service, and that was where my recent experience was at the time.
One of the things that I liked that was in the article was that you said being in customer service played to your advantage because you kind of had to learn everything about your company, and that some of that knowledge transferred over.
Right, because after about a 3-month training, the company expects you to be ready to answer any question that is wide variety of questions that customers call in with. I was not only brand new to the department, I was brand new to the company, so understanding, and to the industry, so understanding how the electricity works from a customer's perspective, and not so much what the fleet has, how the fleet is involved with the customer's experience, but the background of knowing how the company provides a service to the customer, and that in the end, our ultimate goal is to provide that reliable service. It gave me the background to think, okay, if I'm making decisions related to vehicles and the fleet, I need to know the overall vision of the company and what our purpose is in the community. So there are some, fine details that I learned, what departments do what, and who I can turn to if I have questions, on top of account information, which I really didn't take with me to fleet, but it's more of the networking and understanding all that webbing and connections within a company.
Yeah, and by the way, a shout out to our editor, Sean Lydon, who did a great job on the article. And I'm going to quote the article. I love this quote. This is you. I like how fleet affects the entire company and business across all departments.
Absolutely. Just about every department has to use a vehicle at some time to do their business. And it reminds the fleet department not only how important it is that we exist, but also how important it is that we do our job the best we can to make sure they have vehicles to use to further the business, further whatever projects are going on, whether they're starting new infrastructure or doing maintenance. It's really neat also to understand each of the unique scenarios that occur with the different types of vehicles. So you've got a pickup truck, and one department may use it more of like a people mover and just go around, visit job sites. And then you've got another department that may use that exact same pickup truck for something completely different, more of towing tools around or have specialty equipment installed in it, but it's the same truck, right? But it's treated different ways, and we need to be aware of that to be successful as a fleet department.
That sounds good. Let's use that as a springboard and talk a little bit about your fleet. You have about 1,000 vehicles?
So we have about 1,000 vehicles. We support Tucson Electric Power, and we have a sister company. So the overall fleet count that our department just manages is more in the lines of 1,500.
And being in Tucson, being in the desert, and we'll do a deeper dive into this later, there must be quite a bit of versatility in your fleet. I'm really interested in the way you use all-terrain vehicles in the desert.
Well, because it's the desert, it doesn't necessarily mean we need like vehicles that can only drive in, the sand or the dirt. I think our more unique piece of equipment that we have that's for our environment is maybe four-wheel drive. There isn't anything super specialized really in the vehicles that we use here in the desert. We have some places that are a little higher elevation. So we've got a mountain in Tucson, Mount Lemmon, and we have a special track mobile that goes up, and we have some communication towers they're way up towards the top of that mountain that we use. And that isn't necessarily desert specific, but that's something that's a little different for that type of terrain.
That sounds really good. So in the article, there's a really beautiful photo of you in front of a couple of EVs. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing as far as sustainability and what EVs you're using in your fleet.
Sure. So over the last 4 years, our focus has really been just replacing passenger vehicles. So that's sedans, SUVs. So when those are due for replacement, we're buying something that plugs in. We've bought several Nissan Leafs, Chevy Bolts. We've gotten some plug-in hybrid vehicles. We have Mitsubishi Outlanders. We've got a couple Pacifica minivans and some Ford Fusions. That has really been our focus. We do have some reservations for some EV pickup trucks, and that's the next class of vehicles that we hope to replace some of our gasoline vehicles with these electric pickup trucks. When we get our hands on some, then we'll pass them around to the different departments and see if there are any limitations, and that will really drive how soon and how many we replace at a time. But we're focusing on this smaller class, light-duty class of vehicles, and it's been successful. The ones we've got in the fleet, it's between certain departments that's just the only type of vehicle that they need is something to put some people in and travel around town. It works great in our motor pool, and we've got some charging stations that we're looking into that technology to install more charging stations on the property because we don't have very many, but we have some. So that's also kind of another avenue of EVs and electrification that we're going down.
I like that you're not using just one EV. You're kind of spreading it around. You're kind of trying them all, looking for a lot of different solutions. I like that.
Yeah, we want to be versatile because that's what our current fleet is. And we didn't really want to challenge the employees to tailor their business and their work to the vehicle. We wanted to exchange their vehicle with something like what they're already driving.
I like that you brought up EV charging stations because this has kind of been my new hot topic lately. Everybody seems to be getting a handle on the vehicles, but the charging stations, especially with you, again, being down in Tucson, being down in a desert area, have there been any challenges you guys have run into with charging stations other than rattlesnakes or anything like that?
I would say some challenges we've run into are more internal. So we want to take our time to really understand the different types of charging stations. And even when we get our mind wrapped around one type, that is just an ever-changing area that we've got a provider that builds their charging stations one way, and then the platform that they use is a little different and some the same as their competitor. So getting our head wrapped around that to make a good decision on which ones we're going to buy next, that's what we've been taking our time on. I was going to say the actual hardware, we have yet to see how the sun is impacting the charging station. The fading of the outside, the screens, we can see some wear just because of the heat, and they're right outside and really don't have much cover. But we're taking our time and really understanding which charging stations do we want and how many, because when we buy a bunch and then technology is going to change, and the next set we'll buy will probably have even more features and be even better for us. So we're putting a lot in planning. We're putting a lot of time in planning right now.
Wow, those are some good tips because, at first I thought there were only a few options for chargers, but the more I get out there, there's dozens and dozens. And I like your point about the technology is changing, so you really do have to shop around.
Yeah, and listening to peers, listening to other utility companies that maybe are a few steps ahead of us and learning from what they've learned has been very helpful too. Saying how either sharing information about what actual hardwares work better for them, or even going, hey, this is our approach and now we've changed and now we're including all these other questions when we go out to bid or when we go talk to a vendor. And having that information at the start for us has helped us to not have to relearn what they learned. So there's a lot of sharing of information that has been awesome between utility companies especially.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason for this podcast too. And although we have our roots in the utility fleet market, I like to think this podcast is for any fleet manager in any market. And especially I'm proud the utility fleet managers are really leading the charge. Electrification.
Was that a pun? Was the pun intended there? Leading the charge? Kurt?
Oh, I like that. I didn't even realize I made that pun, but I'm going to steal that. I should have just said EVs instead of electrification.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, listen, we're gonna have a little bit of fun now here in the middle. I always like to have a good wildlife encounter story, and so you are down in Tucson. I'm out of the Midwest, so we don't have some of the creatures here that you have there. Do you have a good wildlife encounter story for us?
I do. One evening after work, I pull into my driveway, park my car, and my routine is I put a bunch of stuff in my passenger seat. So I'm here gathering all the stuff that I put in my passenger seat to try to hold as many things as I can as I'm exiting the vehicle. And I realize when I step away from the door to close it that there's a tarantula maybe 6 inches from my foot. And he's just standing there. And I thought, and my first reaction that I remember was kind of jumping back and saying some choice words, trying to shut the door without it running towards me and then bolting into the driveway. Well, the funny story is that we have a camera outside that points to our driveway. So my husband thought it was real funny to just see what I was doing and really how I reacted. Yeah, it was pretty embarrassing watching the video. And he thought it was funnier to then post it on Facebook for our friends and family to watch too. It was
Put
scary.
it on a loop. Is it so it's a gift out there somewhere, right?
That's right. And I wouldn't expect that it would have come and attacked me because I was probably more scared of me than I was of it. But it's a pretty big spider.
It jumped too, huh?
Yeah, it did. It ran away, but it wasn't towards me, thank goodness.
Please tell me you didn't have sandals on.
No, I didn't.
So you did have closed shoes.
I did.
Oh, phew.
Yeah.
That would have been scary. So for those people who've never seen a tarantula before, I was out in California following some friends through the California desert. And I'm going to date myself now. There used to be a show called The Addams Family where this hand walked across the table. And that's what I saw going across the road. It looked like a man's hand walking across the highway. And I was not ready for that. I didn't realize that they grow to be that big.
Yeah.
That's scary. Well, that's a great story. I don't know if I'm going to sleep well tonight, though. So let's get back to business a little bit. I always like to touch upon shop maintenance. And again, I'm going to refer back to the article. I love this quote. You said you didn't come into it pretending to know everything about shop maintenance, and you had to learn the culture. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, through my career prior to TEP, I hadn't been in any type of shop environment. So knowing that the department now that I'm working in my primary place was in the office, but we had our own mechanic shop, and I have to interact with all the employees in the shop too. Knowing that it's totally different than working in an office, right? You've got the actual physical environment of it is different. Then you've got the interactions between people are different. It was fun to have that experience, even if that wasn't what I was doing for my 8 hours a day. I was able to visit the shop, spend some time with some of the mechanics, understand, the tooling they use, and really how the processes are in the shop. It's this well-oiled machine, unintended, no, to see how work gets done and just the levels of expertise that each mechanic had based on their experience and the vehicles that they've worked on. And it was really neat that it wasn't just from a retail customer's point of view of when they take their vehicle to the shop, they just hand over the keys and say, hey, it's making this clanky noise. And then you don't really see what goes on when they're fixing it. And maybe you're not even very interested in it. But it's like I got to go behind the scenes in that shop environment and go, wow, okay, this whole world back here is really interesting. And it helped me to appreciate what the shop did, and then just how our overall department works well together. And we need, both parts to be successful.
And at the same time, it's a fresh set of eyes. So, one of the challenging things I've found in business is when I have worked places where people will tell me, well, this is the way we've done it the same way for the last 20 years, So I'm sure you brought that office perspective there, and maybe that was allowed you to streamline some things.
Yeah. Things as simple as going from handwriting something on a piece of paper to saying, hey, I know an easier way. If you were to type it up, then it's easier to interpret if you're sharing with other people, and you can send it in an email. Even things like that, where at the time I started, our mechanics were just getting into getting their own laptops and understanding how to use some of the Microsoft programs, and email access was then now more available. So I had skills that I said, hey, let me help you. You can try to do what you did without the computer and just have it on standby, but that's not really the purpose of why you have the computer now. So the folks leading the project to kind of transition that, they did lean on people in the office to help and to really show the mechanics, hey, just try it, and it's going to work better for you for sure.
To build on that with your office background, how did that help you with GPS, telematics, and all the technology? Did you, kind of mainstream that with your company? Because I know a lot of people in utility offices have been very valuable with processing the data of telematics.
When we first introduced it, the focus was safety, and it still is. Right? We want to know where the vehicles are in case there's an emergency or we need to respond to something. It just helps us to be more efficient. But the more we understood what it was capturing, then the data piece really started to show. Where it's, okay, well, let's understand, let's pull in mileage from telematics and put it into our fleet management software. Let's now look at idling. Now let's look at, utilization and all the different numbers that we didn't have at our fingertips before we had telematics. We created another role in our department to focus on data analytics. We have a data analyst now. And prior to knowing what telematics could bring, that position didn't seem important. So yes, being able to have someone focused on looking at the data, helping us to understand it, to then make better business decisions, ultimately keeping vehicles longer, helping business areas use their vehicles better, or find out, where there's some weaknesses that we can say, hey, this is how your drivers are using the vehicle, and this is how it's affecting the vehicle, the company, it's being more expensive, whatever the case is, and then saying, help us to fix it, right? And having that backup information just paints the picture better.
While we're on the shop maintenance subject, we've got to take advantage of your experience of working with a fleet in hot desert conditions. So I would like to know, what are some things that you do or people can do to help prepare their fleet for dangerously hot weather? But back to the shop maintenance and the heat, are there certain additives you use in coolant, tires, anything that you do with the tires? Just tips like that you could pass on to our listeners.
Yeah, the main consumables, the main things that are affecting our fleet because of the hot weather are tires and batteries. And obviously we have a lot of AC repairs. What we try and concentrate on in the PMs and the routine maintenance is, we're watching the condition of the tires. We stress that to the employees and the drivers because if it's a vehicle that's parked a lot, then the tires dry rot faster. Just the impact of the pavement being so hot and their tire pressure, we have to make sure that they understand how important it is that they check their tire pressure. Batteries, they just don't last as long when it's hot outside. So our suppliers that we lean on for batteries, they're ready, they're prepared, they've stocked up for us. Right? So we make sure that we have a good inventory. So when drivers need batteries replaced, then we're going to be available and change them out right away. AC repairs, because they're just used so much more and they turn them way up, which is totally understandable. And we've been over 100 degrees for, I think maybe about a week now. And we want to make sure our drivers are comfortable and stay on top of the machining we use to service the ACs and have all the supplies so when they do break that we can fix them right away. Now, windshield replacements, so there's a lot of rocks and dirt and road construction. That's probably in a lot of places. And when those rocks get kicked up in the air on the freeway, it's inevitable. They hit our windshield, and we've got a couple suppliers ready so we can change out some windshields.
Any tips on coolant? Is there a certain brand or mixture that you guys?
No, not that I'm aware of, Kurt. There's no specialized coolant that we put in our vehicles. I think more so that we monitor the levels and we make sure that drivers that they understand how important it is too.
These are all great tips. Yeah, tell us, let's go a little bit deeper on the tires. So is it just, you're driving in the down hot highways that the pavement's almost boiling? Does that probably causes the treads of the tires to come off quicker?
I don't know if there have been any, or we haven't performed any studies on it, but just understanding, the quality of tires we pick is important, right? Because if we go with ones that are just not as good a quality, then more likely they're not going to last because of that extra wear that goes on them. The dry heat is a big factor too. So that's why we pick good quality tires because, it impacts them. And the last thing we need is to go on a bunch of service calls for tires when we could remedy that by buying good quality tires up front.
That's a great tip as well. Well, you were involved in, I believe, the first EUFMC Electric Utility Fleet Managers Conference in Williamsburg, the first Women of Utility Fleet meeting.
Yes, sir. Yep, and it was well attended. So for the inaugural event, since Women in Utility Fleet, we just started it, we just had as a breakfast, and it was really more of a networking opportunity for women who attended to be able to meet each other, exchange information, talk about, we had these questions on the table. They were like icebreaker questions that were geared towards fleet. Just talk about what each of the different representatives and their companies, what they experience, and just sharing ideas. Where we're going to take it next, that's still to be determined. So the same women who attended the breakfast, we're reaching out, just kind of getting a survey on what expectations they may have for women in utility fleet, along with, our own internal board planning. And then it may look different next year.
Yeah, that's fantastic that you did it. Utility Fleet Professional is a woman-owned company. So I applaud you guys for doing that. How did it come about? Was that something that the EUFMC staff came up with, or did you champion that, or how did it come about?
Actually, we saw an uptick in women fleet representatives attend just over the past, I would say, maybe 2 years. And in 21, after I think it was our final dinner, we had one fleet representative. She wanted to gather all the women together and take a picture. And that picture really kind of opened our eyes as a board to say, wow, okay, there's interest and there's like this community here that we should do something about, right? So there were some fleet representatives who were curious to know, hey, would we be doing something just specifically for women? And our director, Ann Brown-Haley, she also had, in the back of her mind that there have been interests in the past. And I think with the increase of women fleet attendees and just, kind of what had happened in 2021 and just kind of the overall culture too, is what really drove us to say, all right, let's go ahead and start for 2022. Let's plan an event. And then that's when we just started with the breakfast.
That's fantastic. I'm glad it was a success, and I certainly hope that you can build upon it.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Well, I'm going to kind of wrap up here. I mean, we got a lot of great information, and I thank you for being interviewed in our June Utility Fleet Professional issue. If people haven't seen that, they can go to utilityfleetprofessional.com on our website and click on the issue and read the article, and certainly hope that they tune into the podcast. And if any of the ladies out there want to join an organization, how can they get a hold of you?
So on our EUFMC website, there is contact information, and that's where we'd be updating what the future event looks like.
Perfect. Well, again, Julie Gomez, thank you so much of Tucson Electric Power for being our guest. A lot of great information, and thank you for that tarantula story that'll be ingrained in my mind for many years. And I just want to remind all of our listeners and everybody out there to roll safe.
Thanks, Kurt.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementing.